channel has a slightly different war. Did you notice that? If you don't like the way it's going on Channel 2, try Channel 9. Maybe your side is winning over there. And the ratings are good. The ratings are good for the war. We like war. We're good at it. We're a warlike people. This country is only 200 years old, and we average a major war every 20 years. 200 years old, 10 wars. Do the arithmetic yourself. We are a warlike people.
On this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast, we're talking about George Carlin. George Carlin is an icon of comedy, and he's one of the reasons that comedy is the way it is today. George Carlin would probably be canceled if he were still alive. He died in 2008. If you don't know who George Carlin is, keep listening.
But in the bullshit department, a businessman can't hold a candle to a clergyman. Because I got to tell you the truth, folks. I got to tell you the truth. When it comes to bullshit, big time, major league bullshit, you have to stand in awe of the all-time champion of false promises and exaggerated claims, religion. No contest. No contest. Religion easily has the greatest bullshit story ever told. Think about it. Religion has actually convinced people that there's an invisible man living in the sky who watches everything you do every minute of every day. And the invisible man has a special list of 10 things he does not want you to do. And if you do any of these 10 things, he has a special place full of fire and smoke and burning and torture and anguish where he will send you to live and suffer and burn and choke and scream and cry forever and ever till the end of time. But he loves you.
George Carlin is well known as a comedian, but he got his start in radio working as a DJ. He worked his way up and started doing popular TV shows, eventually was on The Tonight Show, and then toured thereafter. This was a time in comedy where you could appear on national TV once and build a career out of it. He was also an actor. He did lots of important and interesting comedic works, all this type of thing, some of which he tried to pull into a stand-up comedy. But he's most well known for stand-up comedy, in particular, his love of freedom and free speech. He spoke out against wars and against the government. He was a Vietnam War protester. He was so much ahead of his time that much of the cultural commentary in his routines is still relevant today. Many people most likely know him now from short clips posted to Facebook. Even from the grave, he is a cultural tour de force. George Carlin was a member of the silent generation, born in 1937. He recited his New York credentials as being born in Manhattan on East 63rd Street in New York Hospital, making him a native for city, county, and state. He joked that he was conceived at a small motel near Rockaway Beach in one of his stand-up specials. He dropped out of high school and joined the Air Force in the late 1950s. Carlin shares the illustrious company of many members of the silent generation who were responsible for creating the 1960s counterculture. People like Gloria Steinem, Jack Kerouac, and Allen Ginsberg. He did 13 stand-up specials, including Complaints and Grievances, which he bravely performed at the Beacon Theater 10 weeks after 9/11, when no one wanted to go anywhere or do anything. He was a must-have star of the 1970s and 80s. He was a regular on evening talk shows like The Tonight Show and The Merv Griffin Show. He also appeared on That Girl in a recurring role. He was the first host of Saturday Night Live and won a Grammy in 1972 for his album FM and AM. He would win 4 Grammys for comedy. Millennials will remember him being one of the actors to play Mr. Conductor on the PBS program Shining Time Station, the U.S. airing of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, an honor he shares with Ringo Starr and Alex Baldwin. He was countercultural. He broke down barriers. However, he also created what we now know as the decency standard. The airing of his 7 words you can't say on television, that I'll say in a minute, created a standard for indecent speech on public airwaves that remains in effect to this day, resulting from a 1978 Supreme Court decision. He was the type of observational comedian that told great truths, and often he didn't even include punchlines to tell people these truths. He delighted in the absurdity of our time. However, many people might interpret his cynicism incorrectly. He was quoted in his obituary in the New York Times as saying, "Scratch a cynic and you'll find a disappointed idealist." I don't know what his high ideals were that made him so cynical, but given the political environment he came of age in, where there was an out-and-out war of the youth versus the establishment, and then the co-opting of that counterculture for the establishment, I imagine him to be one disappointed person.
Fort builders, land grabbers, and bomb throwers, folks. We're not happy. We're not happy unless we're dropping bombs on some helpless civilian population that has no argument with us whatsoever. No argument with us whatsoever. We are bomb throwers. And when we're not dropping high explosives, on some small nation that only has a marginally effective air force, then we're declaring war on something at home. We love to declare war on something at home, don't we? Anything we don't like about ourselves, we have to declare war on it. We can't get rid of this war mentality from our public life. We got a war on poverty, war on crime, war on cancer, war on litter, war on drugs. Did you ever notice we don't have a war on homelessness? No war on homelessness. You know why? You know why? I'll tell you why, because there's no money in it. There's no money in that problem. Nobody stands to get rich off of that problem. You find a solution to homelessness where the businessmen and the politicians can steal a couple of $1 million each, you'll see the streets of America begin to clear up pretty fast.
Carlin's comedy grew up in a time of deep censorship. He attacked censorship straight on by introducing his famous joke of dirty words that you couldn't say on television. If you have kids listening, or those that don't want to hear vulgar language, you might want to skip ahead about 10 seconds. His 7 magic words you couldn't say on television were as follows in this order: shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits. Now, it started as 4 and got expanded to 7. This was the final version. If you were skipping ahead to miss the vulgar language, you can start listening again. In 1972, when he performed that joke on stage, he was charged with obscenity in Milwaukee after performing the bit at the Milwaukee Summerfest. George Carlin liked to push the limits of free speech. You can say bitch on television now. We have Carlin to thank for that. Carlin came of age in a time where one could be arrested for saying the wrong thing and disturbing the peace, just like he was in 1972. The thing I love about George Carlin's comedy is that he can take something incredibly serious and make us laugh about it. Comics are the truth tellers of our age. They take complex things that we have a hard time understanding, and they reduce it down to just the truth, and then add some comedy. You walk away with the familiarity and a great coping mechanism. In preparation for this podcast, I decided to watch all 13 specials. He spoke out against Reagan, Iran-Contra, and the 1991 invasion of Kuwait. He spoke out against the rich and riffed on his Irish working-class background. He attacked the Christian right wing and their stance on abortion. If you've seen cartoons about people that wanted to protect a fetus but not help raise a child, Carlin did it.
This is called advertising lullaby. Keeping in mind, of course, that the whole purpose of advertising is to lull you to sleep. Quality, value, style, service, selection, convenience, economy, savings, performance, experience, hospitality, low rates, friendly service, name brands, easy terms, affordable prices, money-back guarantee, free installation. Free admission, free appraisal, free alterations, free delivery, free estimates, free home trial, and free parking. No cash, no problem, no kidding. No fuss, no muss, no risk, no obligation, no red tape, no down payment, no entry fee, no hidden charges, no purchase necessary, no one will call on you, no payments or interest till September. But limited time only, though, so act now, order today, send no money, offer good while supplies last, 2 to a customer, each item sold separately, batteries not included, mileage may vary, all sales are final, allow 6 weeks for delivery, some items not available, some assembly required, some restrictions may apply. So come on in. Come on in. Come on in for a free demonstration and a free consultation with our friendly professional staff. Our experienced and knowledgeable sales representatives will help you make a selection that's just right for you and just right for your budget. And say, don't forget to pick up your free gift, a classic, deluxe, custom, designer, luxury, prestige, high-quality, premium, select, gourmet pocket pencil sharpener. Yours for the asking, no purchase necessary. It's our way of saying thank you. And if you act now, we'll include an extra added free complimentary bonus gift, a classic, deluxe, custom, designer, luxury, prestige, high-quality, premium, select, gourmet, combination key ring, magnifying glass, and garden hose in a genuine imitation leather-style carrying case with authentic vinyl trim. Yours for the asking, no purchase necessary. It's our way of saying thank you. Actually, it's our way of saying bend over just a little bit farther so we can stick this big advertising dick up your ass a little bit deeper. A little bit deeper. A little bit deeper. You miserable, no good fucking consumer asshole. Because you do know, folks, living in this country, you're bound to know that every time you're exposed to advertising, you realize once again that America's leading industry, America's most profitable business, is still the manufacture, packaging, distribution, and marketing of bullshit. High quality, grade A, prime cut, pure American bullshit. And the sad part is that most people seem to have been indoctrinated to believe that bullshit only comes from certain places, certain sources, advertising, politics, salesmen. Not true. Bullshit is everywhere. Bullshit is rampant. Parents are full of shit, teachers are full of shit, clergymen are full of shit, and law enforcement people are full of shit. This entire country is completely full of shit, and always has been. From the Declaration of Independence to the Constitution to the Star-Spangled Banner, it's still nothing more than one big steaming pile of red, white, and blue all-American bullshit. Because think of how we started. Think of that. This country was founded by a group of slave owners who told us all men are created equal. Oh yeah, all men, except for Indians and niggers and women, right? Always like to use that authentic American language. This was a small group of unelected white male land-holding slave owners who also suggested their class be the only one allowed to vote. Now that is what's known as being stunningly and embarrassingly full of shit. And I think Americans really show their ignorance when they say they want their politicians to be honest. What are these fucking cretins talking about? If honesty were suddenly introduced into American life, the whole system would collapse. No one would know what to do. Honesty would fuck this country up. And I think deep down Americans know that. That's why they elected and re-elected Bill Clinton. That's why. Because the American people like their bullshit right out front where they can get a good, strong whiff of it. Clinton might be full of shit, but at least he lets you know it. Dole tried to hide it, didn't he? Dole kept saying, I'm a plain and honest man. Bullshit. People don't believe that. What did Clinton say? He said, hi, folks, I'm completely full of shit, and how do you like that? And the people said, you know something? At least he's honest. At least he's honest about being completely full of shit. It's just like the business world, same as business. Everybody knows by now, all businessmen are completely full of shit. Just the worst kind of low-life criminal cocksuckers you could ever want to run into. A fucking piece of shit businessman. And the proof of it is they don't even trust each other. They don't trust one another. When a businessman sits down to negotiate a deal, the first thing he does is to automatically assume that the other guy is a complete lying prick who's trying to fuck him out of his money. So he's got to do everything he can to fuck the other guy a little bit faster and a little bit harder. And he's got to do it with a big smile on his face. You know that big bullshit businessman smile? And if you're a customer, whoa, that's when you get the really big smile. Customer always gets that really big smile as the businessman carefully positions himself directly behind the customer and unzips his pants and proceeds to service the account. I'm servicing this account. This customer needs service. Now you know what they mean. Now you know what they mean when they say, we specialize in customer service. Whoever coined the phrase, let the buyer beware, was probably bleeding from the asshole. But that's business. That's business.
I love George Carlin for his honesty and how he makes fun of things, even serious things like suicide. His delivery is raw, as he famously said once, "As you can tell, I don't do transitional material." He railed against the habits of 2 generations of kids. Near his death, he joked that he was now an old fuck, and that's the kind of raw but smart humor Carlin was known for. He would make you laugh and give you a great truth to go along with it. In one of his specials, he remarked, "We are a warlike people. We're only 200 years old, and we've averaged a major war every 10 years. Do the arithmetic on that, folks." Another one of my favorites, and you'll have seen this one on Facebook, it's called The American Dream, because you have to be asleep to believe it. George Carlin died at the right time. He died before #MeToo. He died before cultural appropriation and the speech police took over politics in the public discourse. If Carlin were alive today, Twitter would probably explode. He would say anything to anyone at any time. He was the tip of the spear of free speech in a time when public speech was censored with the force of law. He said things that might offend people or make them uncomfortable. That was his whole program. Needless to say, there would be a Twitter storm against him now. In his personal life, George Carlin, like most comics, was somewhat of a tragic figure. He used cocaine and was known for quitting the drug. However, he was an alcoholic and abused Vicodin. He had open-heart surgeries in the late 70s and early 1980s. His triumphant return in a 1983 special was his comeback after 5 years. Eventually, he did get sober, but he struggled with addiction as late as 2004. He married twice, and once remarked that life was a series of dogs. You could have your dog die and go and buy a new dog that looked like your old dog and just keep having a series of dogs. The reason why I think everyone should become familiar with George Carlin's work has a great deal to do with freedom of speech and censorship. We live in an age now where one wrong tweet, one wrong thing can end someone's whole career. And it's not just, I think, about the age of Me Too either. Certainly, people that assault others ought to not be lauded in public and should have legal consequences for their actions. However, we do live in an age where there's a certain amount of speech policing, and oftentimes people don't realize that just because someone has said something, one, doesn't necessarily mean that they believe it, and for two, doesn't necessarily always mean that there's a malicious intent. I think the intent behind speech, and this is one of George Carlin's points, the intent behind speech is very different than just simply saying something.
I don't like words that hide the truth. I don't like words that conceal reality. I don't like euphemisms or euphemistic language. And American English is loaded with euphemisms because Americans have a lot of trouble dealing with reality. Americans have trouble facing the truth. So they invent a kind of a soft language to protect themselves from it. And it gets worse with every generation. For some reason, it just keeps getting worse. I'll give you an example of that. There's a condition in combat. Most people know about it. It's when a fighting person's nervous system has been stressed to its absolute peak and maximum, can't take any more input. The nervous system has either snapped or is about to snap. In the First World War, that condition was called shell shock. Simple, honest, direct language. 2 syllables. Shell shock. Almost sounds like the guns themselves. That was 70 years ago. Then a whole generation went by, And the Second World War came along, and the very same combat condition was called battle fatigue. 4 syllables now. Takes a little longer to say. Doesn't seem to hurt as much. Fatigue is a nicer word than shock. Shell shock. Battle fatigue. Then we had the war in Korea, 1950. Madison Avenue was riding high by that time. And the very same combat condition was called operational exhaustion. Hey, we're up to 8 syllables now. And the humanity has been squeezed completely out of the phrase. It's totally sterile now. Operational exhaustion. Sounds like something that might happen to your car. Then, of course, came the war in Vietnam, which has only been over for about 16 or 17 years. And thanks to the lies and deceit surrounding that war, I guess it's no surprise that the very same condition was called post-traumatic stress disorder. Still 8 syllables, but we've added a hyphen. And the pain is completely buried under jargon. Post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll bet you if we'd have still been calling it shell shock, some of those Vietnam veterans might have gotten the attention they needed. But it didn't happen. And one of the reasons is because we were using that soft language. That language that takes the life out of life. And it is a function of time. It does keep getting worse. Give you another example. Sometime during my life, toilet paper became bathroom tissue. I wasn't notified of this. No one asked me if I agreed with it. It just happened. Toilet paper became bathroom tissue. Sneakers became running shoes. False teeth became dental appliances. Medicine became medication. Information became directory assistance. The dump became the landfill. Car crashes became automobile accidents. Partly cloudy became partly sunny. Motels became motor lodges. House trailers became mobile homes. Used cars became previously owned transportation. Room service became guest room dining. And constipation became occasional irregularity. When I was a little kid, if I got sick, they wanted me to go to the hospital and see the doctor. Now they want me to go to a health maintenance organization. Or a wellness center to consult a healthcare delivery professional. Poor people used to live in slums. Now the economically disadvantaged occupy substandard housing in the inner cities. And they're broke. They're broke. They don't have a negative cash flow position. They're fucking broke. Because a lot of them were fired. You know, fired. Management wanted to curtail redundancies in the human resources area. So many people are no longer viable members of the workforce. Smug, greedy, well-fed white people have invented a language to conceal their sins. It's as simple as that. The CIA doesn't kill anybody anymore. They neutralize people. Or they depopulate the area. The government doesn't lie. It engages in disinformation. The Pentagon actually measures nuclear radiation in something they call sunshine units. Israeli murderers are called commandos. Arab commandos are called terrorists. Contra killers are called freedom fighters. Well, if crime fighters fight crime and firefighters fight fire, what do freedom fighters fight?
I think it is so important now, today, to be able to say things, bring up things, particularly when you're talking about experiences of a marginalized community or being able to say very clearly a tragedy that is going on. However, oftentimes, due to the sensibilities of others, people are now afraid to say or do anything that might cause a Twitter mob or cause cancellation culture. And what's funny is 20 years before cancel culture even came along, in 1991, George Carlin was already complaining about political correctness in speech and complaining about how much language had changed. George Carlin is a cautionary tale, I think, for everyone, for several reasons. He grew up in an era where, as I said, censorship had the force of law. Only now we have the court of public opinion, where oftentimes people are tried and convicted in 20 minutes when one person comes along and says, this person said this and therefore they must be X. Now, I think some people that can be a fair assessment. If a politician is going around saying racist things, that's something every American should be concerned about. If an entertainer goes around saying something, and their intent isn't malicious, but rather it's said for the purposes of entertainment, I think then that's quite a bit of a different story. Since George Carlin's death, comedy has come under fire for comedians who punch down, quote unquote, with using other people's disabilities and identities as jokes for entertaining purposes. I think George Carlin would find that same complaint that he made in 1991 to be prescient today. That indeed there's been a great softening of the language, that there is too much of a focus on not making people feel bad. One of the things he also complained about was support group language. And he had these riffs called lullabies where he would say a whole bunch of different words in a row connected together to have some sort of meaning in order to show how collectively meaningless those words were. George Carlin also represents a type of masculinity that I think is long gone today. He was not a fan of support group language. He wasn't a fan of too many feelings. He didn't talk a lot about his personal problems on stage, although he had plenty of them. He was a man of his time. He was a man who just kind of believed you dealt with your problems, you bucked up, you manned up, and you just sort of went on with it no matter what, rather than sort of emasculating oneself through an excess of feeling or an idea that you should only deal with your problems with, have a drink, get laid, who needs a therapist. That is emblematic of his time, and that's why I think it's a good thing he died before the term toxic masculinity came along. Certainly today, his comedy, if he were still around and making specials, people would certainly say, oh, he's promoting toxic masculinity, and Twitter would be very troubled by the things he said, and people would say, well, he's old, he's a man of his time, and people would say, oh, he should do better, and there would be this debate. But the magic of him passing before then is people can just clip out the social commentary bits of his specials, post them on social media, and I've never seen people go after him in the same way that a lot of other very much living comedians have been gone after, certainly people like Kathy Griffin. Kathy Griffin has certainly picked up the torch for free speech from George Carlin. She talks about him a lot and the type of scrutiny that comics will go under, agree with what she did or not. It's an important fact to defend free speech in all its forms, even the speech that we don't like. Although George Carlin would never survive modern cancel culture due to some of the problematic things that he said years ago, that did not make him any less a fan of attacking the wealthy for hoarding wealth, attacking corporate culture, business culture, American business, the American war machine. This man was a product of the 60s. He was a product of Vietnam protests. He had military experience of his own. He knew from whence he spoke. However, at the same time, he also was a fan of the system breaking down. He had this great bit about water where he would drink the water in the middle of a set, and he would ask people if the water was good, and he would always say, no matter where I go, the water is also bad, and that's a symbol that the system is breaking down. And for him, that was just fine. It was okay that the system was breaking down. It was okay that the water wasn't good. And he would make a big show of drinking it anyway, and it makes for a nice bit to have an excuse for water in the middle of a comedy show. But he was, excited about that, and he was okay as long as it didn't really affect him personally. He just kind of felt fine by me, fine by me. He was happy to see the chaos going on and the system breaking down and things going badly. He just didn't care as long as it didn't affect him personally. And I wonder if in some sick way that isn't some kind of weird Zen. If that isn't some sort of odd way of him kind of letting us know that there's probably nothing we can do about it. So as long as it's not touching you personally, how much should you care? I imagine a young George Carlin who had a lot of ideals and ideas about what the world could be and how the world could change. And then he realized that when you own the money and the banks and the corporations, that you own the world. And I imagine at some point in his life, he just sort of gave up. Hence, Under Every Cynic is a very disappointed idealist. George Carlin died of heart failure on June 22nd, 2008. That's the day that freedom of speech officially died. That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.